look, 1 in 7 jobs across the country are auto-related. And we saw news this morning, Toyota is expecting that their profits are going to be down 80%. We're looking at millions of lost car sales this year. And, we need to help. So Debbie Dingell and I have helped lead an effort in the House. We're going to be submitting a letter to the Speaker and to Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republican side, signed by nearly 75 members, bipartisan, that we ought to make sure that this next stimulus package needs to address not only the auto assembly folks, but the auto suppliers, the whole supply chain, and because this is a critical industry, a manufacturing industry that America needs to have.
Yes, and are you, Representative Dingell, can you hear me now? And maybe you'd like I actually addressed the first question to you. Why does it make sense in this case, you say?
Well, the fact of the matter is that there are more than 10 million jobs. We're still 5% of the private industry economy in the United States. And I want to make it really clear, the auto industry isn't asking for a handout in any way. They're asking for a hand up. The fact of the matter is that there is an ecosystem that starts with the worker. Then you've got the OEMs, the car companies themselves, the suppliers, and the dealers. And there are a lot of, when you get to the supplier community, there are jobs in every state across this country. So we are worried about the economy. The auto industry is still the backbone of the American economy, and we just want to make sure that, as we talked about other industries, main industries like the auto industry are part of the discussions. The Midwest matters. And it matters, by the way, more than at election time.
All right, Andrew?
Let me ask either of you this question, which is, I think we all want to save the employees and help these industries, no question. The question, of course, is how to do it, which is to say, when we rescued the automobile makers in 2008 and 9, the United States taxpayer took a piece of the company, received equity effectively in the company, and participated to some degree in the upside of that. Because we were protecting those specific industries. We've now done something similar, though, at a lesser level with the airlines. How would you think it should be approached?
So I want to be really clear. This is not 2008. The companies are not in the same position. You have to divide this into 3 categories. First, right now, is just the reopening. How do you keep the workers safe? They need PPE. There have been very stringent protocols implemented at the plants. And for everybody across the ecosystem, how do you keep people safe? 2, as you start back up, the suppliers need liquidity. They're in a 45-day payment process. There are many suppliers that simply do not have the money to pay for raw materials. Some of them are facing bankruptcy. So you've got to make sure that the liquidity is there. They don't want anybody to give them a grant. All they want is an ability to access a loan until they can pay it back. And then as we slowly get back to work, people, there isn't going to be demand for vehicles. There was a good month last month, surprisingly. But then how do you drive demand later in the year?
My other question to both of you that relates to this is, GM, for example, has had, I should say, in past tense, a dividend program and a buyback program. We were talking to a couple of different guests this morning who said that one of the great challenges of this pandemic for all companies is just, and I think the lesson is just how much of or how little of a rainy day fund any company in America has been operating with throughout all this. How would you think about that then in the future if we were to provide some help?
Well, you got to remember when we did this back in 2008, the auto companies did pay the money back. And as you look at the situation now, and Debbie pointed it out, the suppliers are paid 45 days after they actually provide the supply for parts. So as a consequence, because they've already been closed since mid-March, as the autos start up again, and they're looking at doing production perhaps 25% for this next week, that means the suppliers aren't going to be paid until July, yet in fact, they're back into business this week, producing those parts that have to go down the assembly line next week. I don't think they can wait till July, whether it's paying their for their raw materials or their employees. And, you know, when you have an automobile that uses about 2,500 parts, it doesn't work unless they're all there. So this is a critical industry for America. And one of the reasons why we've asked our leadership, Republican and Democrat, to really take a look at this, knowing that it has a tremendous impact on manufacturing across the country, not only here in the Midwest.
I don't think anyone disagrees with you. I think the only question is, what's the fairest way to do it? To implement it, to get the money to these companies and to protect the taxpayer at the same time.
So one of the ideas that Debbie and I are tossing around, and we're getting close to coming to a conclusion on this, starting some discussions, is not like what we did before. There's no cash for clunkers program like there was back in 2008, where people trade in automobiles and get something new. The fleet sales, you know, Hertz was talking about going the bankruptcy route this last week. You've got your communities that are buying police cars. They're probably not going to be doing that in the near term with the shortfalls in state and local budgets. So one of the things that Debbie and I are talking about drafting is something that's actually consumer driven, not a bailout, not a handout, not a plan directly to the auto companies, but instead incentives for consumers, whether they be on the business side or the individual side, to get that demand up where it ought to be, to then bring back the volume of cars in production and obviously the manufacturing back into America.